Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another wonderful episode of ICT's Counter-Terrorism today here on IDC's Zoomcast podcasts that we have been doing over the COVID-19 pandemic era. We have had the opportunity to interview many experts and scholars in the field of counterterrorism and terrorism to speak to us a little bit about the different aspects of combating terrorism in the COVID-19 era, and specifically, how has the COVID-19 era changed the outlook for counter-terrorist experts and practitioners? And we are very honored to be joined today by Mr. Erez Kreiner. He is an ICT associate, and he served for more than 5 years as the director of Israel's National Cybersecurity Authority. There, he was responsible for preventing cyber attacks on Israel's critical infrastructures and assets, and led the national teams to oversee cyber and data security. Mr. Erez Kreiner, how are you doing today?
So far, so good. No complaints. And happy to be here with you, discussing cyber issues.
Very much appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, and glad to see that you are safe and healthy during this pandemic. Let's start off with exactly that. So we have entered an unprecedented time in the world right now, where we are in a state of quarantine basically at all times. A lot of the world has been shut down due to this pandemic. And the one thing that has obviously kept everything going and connected has been the internet. Cyber world has been up and running, and if anything, has been the lifeline for people to be connected to one another, just even via Zoom chats or for work purposes, personal connections. But it's also the cyber world has been used by the enemies of good, the people of the world that are trying to destroy and disturb and destroy and destruct anything that is of good in this world, and trying to get their point across. That is led by terrorists and states that sponsor terrorism. And what have you noticed over the time of the pandemic has been through the cybersphere? What have you noticed? What have you seen? A difference in tactics or an uptick in cyber activity?
Well, Corona time gave a lot of, I would say, attack surface to the people that deals with malicious intentions. I mean that when you are at home, and most people at home, there's a bit of uncertainty about the capabilities of the good guys to defend the cyber infrastructure within companies, within organizations, and even at private houses. People are working from far away in a remote mode, and that gives the attacker a chance to interfere within the communication between the remote station and the network of the company or the organization. There are many kinds of attacks that can be implemented because of the long distance between the user and its network. It's a home network. I mean, when I say home network, I mean the network of the organization or the company that he works for. And using these capabilities in order to enter to the company's network, that creates many opportunities, and we've seen that those opportunities were taken by many attackers all over the world. Another thing about Corona time is that the chain of supply became very long. I mean, if regular time you can take your goods from the nearest dealer, nowadays the chain of supply of the ranges and distances that involve with supplying goods to factories and to hospitals and to many places, many workplaces, become very, very long. And even with a physical approach, you can get and be involved in the long supply chain, and of course interfere with your cyber tools to either to put malicious code within certain goods that are going from the first supplier to the end point, or to bring your malicious codes through remote method into the software that is delivered from supplier in one continent to a consumer at on the other continent. Another thing about the Corona time is because it's not a regular time, people do not know how to use their usual security measures. And if on a everyday or day-to-day work before Corona time, you made your security officer when you came to the company. You made people that involved with cyber security. Now, when you are at home, you do not meet them. You don't get, instructions. You don't get the day-to-day communication with the security staff, and that also creates big holes in the security of any company and any organizations. So these are actually the main challenges during the Corona time to get over the, of course, from a security point of view, is to get over the remote work of the security staff, to get over the remote work of the employees, all the regular employees in the company, and to try to make all the or create all the security circles from far away from the physical place where the computers, where the network servers and etc. Are being placed.
That's very interesting to look at, specifically what you were mentioning about the supply chain and how that can be disrupted, and especially in a time right now when factories are shut down and things like that, and manufacturing is down. So even if there is a need for stuff, there is a lack of resources, a lack of capability right now to get it. So the security end is that much more important to secure whatever supply and chain that still exists. When we look at terrorism as a whole, we usually think about physical attacks. You usually think about a bomb going off in a mall or on a bus. You think about, obviously, 9/11, different terrorist attacks such as those. And with the lack of ability right now to conduct any physical potential terrorist attack, for multiple reasons. One, many countries are just totally locked down. Two, their people aren't going out into the streets, into malls, buses. Everything is shut down from that perspective as well. And also restrictions on amount of people that are allowed to be in places, thus making it that much more difficult for a terrorist and a terrorist organization to conduct a physical attack. Do you think that because of that scenario that has just been outlined, that potentially they are trying to attack through the cyber sphere a lot more? And what do the practitioners need to be looking for, knowing that, okay, physical terrorism is down, but cyber terrorism might be up now?
Any rational cyber organization will do a bit of thinking and will tell himself, all right, transportation now is very difficult. I cannot move a terrorist from one area to another area as I used to do before the Corona time. So what kind of weapons can I use? If I cannot use my physical weapons in the same efficiency as I used before, and if I want still to create terror, I want to create fear among people, so what kind of weapons can I use? And obviously, they will think about using cyber weapons as the perfect remote weapon that can be used from anywhere to any target all over the world. Even even the targets can now be modified from regular civil places like, I don't know, cinemas or malls to other shiny targets like factories, like food factories, like water suppliers, like sewage industry. You know, just think of what will happen in a very crowded city if the sewage water will start to flood the streets. When everybody is there, when you cannot actually move your forces in the same way that you used to when everybody was at work, and even if you do so, maybe you will spread the coronavirus much in a much exponential way than if everybody is sit back at home and do not fear from those cyber attacks on water, on sewage, on electricity, and on other infrastructures. So the creation of a new target is not something that the terror organization would not put their eyes on it. Actually, this is the opposite way. They will try, and they are trying to improve their capabilities to do harm through cyber weapons. And actually, that will stay with us after the corona time. I mean, cyber weapon, if you have it, is not going to disappear. And if you create your capabilities, you're going to use it whenever you are in corona time or in regular time. And this is something that we're going to see more and more because much more work is going to be done from home. A lot of organizations will insert methods of remote work and remote access to their network and to their computerized equipment, and thus give a whole basket of chances to people that have malicious intentions to enter internet. And when you are inside the network, well, you know, the sky is the limit. And sometimes even the skies are not the limit. Just think of a kind of, talking about the sky. When you hear about accident, like what happened to the 737 fleet, they're all grounded now because of a software problem. At least that was published all over. And so when I hear about this kind of a problem that happened, my next thought is, could it be replayed? I mean, can I replay the sequence of scenarios that lead to the fatal effect in a time that I want to play these scenarios? I mean, can I replay it whenever I want to? How do I get to the effect that the software take the control from the pilots and just put the plane with its nose in the ground? So trying to rebuild the scenario, trying to replay the scenario, trying to find out what leads to such mortal effect is something that crossed the mind of people in terror organizations. And as I said before, because of the corona time, it gives much more flexibility to those guys in those organizations that work on creating attack vector to control the infrastructure, to control transportation. Think about trains, think about cars, connected cars, and everybody's talking now about the autonomous car. Just think how much power it will give to those that by malicious intentions can control the data transportation between or the data traffic between the transportation vehicles and the the backend or the servers that process the information that and the data that comes from the vehicles on the road. It's pretty terrifying.
It's very scary to think about how connected the world is and how that opens up so many vulnerabilities and opportunities for bad actors to insert themselves and insert their ideology and what they would like to into our lives, disrupting them, terrorizing them, filling them with fear. And so I wanted to understand from you then, do you think that they are in a process of trying to change the way they operate from a terrorist standpoint? Are they thinking that the new wave is just going to be on cyber and they should focus on that a lot more? Or is this now just a slight reorganization and getting with the times, and this is going to be like a subunit within the organization that would deal with cyber terrorism? And then on the other end, I know practitioners and the defense establishment have a lot of trouble, obviously, defending everything that needs defending because of manpower, resources, money, everything that's involved. And so the question is moving forward, is there going to be, from a practitioner standpoint, a need to redivide and re-examine how resources are spent on defense and not just physical defense, and a lot more needs to be placed on cyber defenses?
Let me give an example from the crime arena. The economic crime is now much bigger than it was 10 years ago. Banks losing a lot of money because of crime. But when was the last time that you have seen a robber with a mask on his face, even during the Corona time, and with a gun in his hand? You don't see them. Why? Because there's no money in the bank branches. You can enter to a bank, but you will not find a lot of money. So where does the money lie? It lies in digits, numbers, in certain files that now are the target of the crime gangs. And they steal money from banks, and they steal money from the transportation of money between the banks. And we've heard about even an organization like SWIFT has been breached, and money was stolen from their transactions. So the crime scene came or went or maneuvered from the physical actions into cyber activity. It is clear that this process is going to be part of the terror scene that we're going to see in the next years. Any terror organization understands that it must have cyber tools under his in his basket. We've seen just a hint from that when we looked at what ISIS had done with using the media. It's not a real cyber, but we've seen some cyber capabilities that this organization showed when trying to get into certain networks. And the use they did with the media, which is right now, you can say it's part of the cyber arena. But the targets are there, and the understanding of that the weapons of the next decades must be part of the or cyber weapons must be part of the arsenal that any terror organization has under his hand. So we're going to see much more terror effects or much more terror acts. And sometimes I was asked, so okay, if this is so simple to make a terror action through cyber arena, why we haven't seen a huge cyber attack that caused many death or huge explosion somewhere. Well, I don't have a good explanation for that, but I also do not have a good explanation why it took 50 years until somebody took two small knives, cut the throat of pilots in a couple of planes, and crashed himself into the Twin Tower. That crime could be done 50 years ago with Chrysler Building, with Empire State Building. There are many skyscrapers in New York. So it could be done through those decades. Still, it took 50 years. I don't think that we're going to wait 50 years until we will suffer from a huge cyber attack. And I hope that defenders all over the world are ready and prepare themselves to, to mitigate this terror attack that will, no doubt, will come. Could be tomorrow, could be in a year, could be in 5 years, but we will be there.
That's a scary thought to think about, that that's on the horizon at some point. And I wanted to ask you that during this COVID-19 era, we have seen some security agencies, we have seen national security advisors, governments, etc., advise and accept and implement ways to track people that have the Corona-19 virus. The COVID-19 virus, we have seen different countries track them through GPS, through different modes of technology. Are those same tools transferable to counterterrorism methods? Are these tools that national security apparatus has used in the past to try to catch terrorists? Are these dual-use technologies? And if so, are these technologies vulnerable to an attack where a cyber attacker can infiltrate the tracking system in some capacity and then change the numbers to a degree that shows that instead of 1,000 people have corona, it's 10,000 people have the corona? Is that something that we should look at, fear, understand?
It's a very good point that you have just put the light on. For many years, I follow the fight of health system all over the world against biologic pandemics. Because fighting pandemic like the pandemic of the COVID-19, you may learn a lot about how to fight viruses in the computer networks. And it's not by mistake that computer malicious code is called virus, because the behavior of those computerized viruses is, you can compare it to the behavior of biologic viruses. Just look what countries and states all over the world been doing through the last 3 or 4 months. Everybody used segmentation. Segmentation, it's a computerized word, but actually, when we're talking about isolating countries, we're talking about creating segmentation in a computer network. When we're talking about doing serologic tests to a bunch of people in a country, we actually, when we compare it to a computer network, we're talking about doing, checks and doing tests by a weekly or a daily frequency. And there are many more things that you can learn from creating the software or the biologic cure to the virus, the way to use it, how to spread it. And remember that computer virus is spread in a much more in a much more quicker time than a biologic virus. You can see the numbers of biologic virus and just compare it to what happened when WannaCry was in the air. WannaCry touched about 200,000 computers in just a couple of hours. no biologic virus can do so. These viruses that we know right now. So there's a lot to learn from the corona time and try to put it and to understand, does your computer network is immune to a kind of digital corona, digital COVID-19 virus. I think that we should be very modest when we're talking about what we have created, which is the cyber domain, and we can still learn a lot from nature and see what we can adapt from the nature way to fight viruses and adapt it into computerized networks.
That's very interesting. I would love to explore that with you further in a whole different conversation, as I know that that is a topic within itself, and how fascinating that you're able to compare and correlate viruses in the biomedical field in humans, how it spreads, how we naturally fight off viruses, and how what we can do medically to fight off viruses as well, and compare that to computers. It just goes to show the interconnectivity between the two. It shows how man has been able to sort of put their identity, even implement themselves, imprint themselves into a computer, knowing that sort of the inner workings are the same, and the same issue. A virus can take down a computer just like it can take down a human body as well. Are there issues using technologies to track the virus? Are there issues that we should be aware of or think about that governments aren't necessarily thinking because they're in a panic mode to try to track the virus, stop the virus, and get back to normal? But maybe they're overlooking some dangers of using these technologies to track the virus. Is there anything like that that we should know about?
Of course, Israel was the pioneer with using techniques that are kept for fighting terror, actually counter-terrorism technique, when they said, all right, we are very good at fighting terrorism, and we create capabilities to hunt terrorists wherever they are. Maybe we can adapt some of these techniques from the physical world into the biological arena. And they use the capabilities of ISA, the Israeli Security Agency, to actually to track or to find the people that were close to people that got or were ill with the COVID-19. Of course, there was a big debate about it, and is it a right method that tools that were developed for counter-terrorism and thus got organization got a lot of permission. Is it right that these tools will be used to within the COVID-19? Well, at least until now, it looks like it was a bit of a success. Still, nobody wants that to use counter-terror tools within fighting pandemics and etc. I guess we're gonna keep this debate during the second wave of COVID-19 that everybody is talking about. My personal opinion is that if it helps, then it should be applied, of course, under a very, very strict control, but it won't be used for any other purposes than this health purpose.
Excellent. I appreciate you explaining that in better terms to us. And before we let you go, one last question for you, Mr. Kreiner. I wanted to understand a little bit about what's happened in the last month and a half. We have seen some, I guess, reports that are out there that there were some major attacks against Israel that were defended off by the Israeli Cyber Authority, emanating out of Iran specifically. What do you think the goal of Iran's is from a cyber perspective right now during this coronavirus time? in attacking Israel. And what we saw very specifically is attacks against civilians and civilian websites, civilian infrastructure, not necessarily the major critical infrastructure, which we have heard that there were attempts to attack that as well. What do you think the message is? What do you think the reason behind it is? And why do you think they potentially have shifted to civilian websites and disrupting the civilian cybersphere?
Well, I can tell, and I don't think it's a great secret that Israel is being attacked on a day-to-day basis all over the year for at least the last 10 years. The sophistication of the attacks is on a wide spectrum. And what we saw, I guess, was a kind of weapon test made by the Iranian. If they were Iranian, I'm not a part of the ISA right now, but as it said in a foreign publication, there were the Iranians or the proxies, because if you are a country, now maybe you were going to use some kind of a proxy organization that you would say, well, it wasn't us. Just bring the technology to a group or to a gang of hackers that can operate the technology, even if they didn't develop the tools, and they will try to use it. They will try to use it maybe undercover, maybe they want to get into control, because the way of operating such a capability, if you can control the water or the computer that controls the water supply to many houses in Israel, then maybe you would like to keep that capability in a undercover mode, so you can turn it on in a big surprise to your country target. But anyway, I guess they check that, or they try to get into that point that they can control many controllers of water supply. And the Israeli cyber defenders and the cyber capabilities of Israel just monitor and cover or explore the undercover operation, and then you can destroy the operation either by cyber tools or by publication or doing any other activity or counter activity. There are many ways to make countermeasures against cyber terror attacks as there is against the physical attacks. So I guess this is part of the ongoing war. It's an ongoing war. It's the war between wars, and it's always there. The waves in the undercover world are never going smaller and smaller, just getting higher and higher, even if we don't see them surrounding us.
Wow, our silent space defenders, cyberspace defenders are out there defending us on a daily basis from attacks from states, from terrorists, and just people looking to disrupt the world around them. Mr. Please.
Yeah, just maybe I can add one sentence to that. This is a very strange situation because, a manager in a commercial organization is capable, to bring more money to the company, to sell or to develop new products. Nobody actually make the CEO to become a general in a cyber war against the Iranians or against some other way. But the situation is that actually civil companies and civil managers are in the front within the cyber arena. Very strange situation.
Yeah, the battlefield generals are a little different than they normally are. Everyone's now on the front line, especially if you are a manager of an important company of any kind that provides essential services, or if you provide critical infrastructure services. So very interesting and a very well-made point there. We're very, very honored to have had you on our program here today. This has been Mr. Erez Kreiner, he is an ICT associate. He has served for more than 5 years as the director of Israel's National Cybersecurity Authority. He was responsible for preventing cyber attacks on Israel's critical infrastructure and assets. He led the national teams to oversee cyber and data security. Mr. Erez Kreiner, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us and enlightening us and having a very sobering conversation about cybersecurity in the COVID-19 era.
Thank you very much. Yalla, bye.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.